is this important to us? Like, is this, is an event interaction or high quality, high touch interaction important? And then knowing that you have, these other campaigns to support different stages in the purchase cycle or customer life cycle or whatever, where does that come in and if it's important? And I think that's something you have to know on the brand side, and you have to figure out what's going on with your goals. Then you can kind of reach out to organizations or cause marketing and see if that fits into your brand. And what we're seeing with a lot of partners is it does, and it provides a lot of value to them.
Welcome to the Backcountry Marketing Podcast by Portside Productions. Today, I'm sitting down with Brian Rodine. He is the Director of Marketing and Trailhead Program Manager at the Friends of the Colorado Avalanche Information Center. He's also an 8-year board member at the Vail Valley Mountain Trail Alliance. Brian, welcome to the show.
Cole, how you doing?
Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. Well, I'm excited to dig into our conversation today, to kind of give folks an idea of what we're going to be talking about today. In the outdoor industry, like cause marketing is such a common phrase. I feel like that gets thrown around. And there's so many brands out there that are infamous with the marketing that they do, the cause marketing that they do. But Brian, what I'm excited to have you on the show is because cause marketing is something that's always talked about from the brand side or the marketing department side or the agency side. But you represent the other half of kind of this equation of cause marketing. As a nonprofit, you work a lot with brands through their marketing departments. And I think you've got some really interesting perspective to share with our audience about, kind of this buzzword of cause marketing. So I guess I'll leave it there. But why is this something you're passionate about? Why is this something you want to have a conversation about today?
Yeah, we're incredibly lucky that I think, people who use the backcountry or enjoy the backcountry are also tend to be invested in different social causes. And the companies who serve that community tend to support various, social, environmental, nonprofits, organizations through their marketing efforts or through their sales or through driving customer donations, a lot of different ways. And I think it's really important to, make sure that those efforts are impactful and helpful to the nonprofit side. I've, have a long career in both sides, actually. I've worked on the client side and kind of seen this from the brand side. And then I've also, spent the last 4 years at a nonprofit and had been on a board of a nonprofit for a while and kind of seen how that can translate to the nonprofit side. And, it's a part of the conversation, like you said, that doesn't get talked about a whole lot. Like how can we really maximize and meet both organizations and both kind of goals and priorities, have the biggest impact and benefit through supporting these causes and organizations. So I'm excited to talk about it.
I got to imagine there's, and we'll get into this, I've got to imagine, but there's a lot of, some really strong wins, but there's also a lot of misses as well because, they're just, things aren't aligned. Brands are wondering like, well, what does this partnership really do for us? Like, does it move the needle? Like, there's probably a lot of gray area that you find yourself operating in and having conversation with brand partners. So I'm excited to kind of dig into that. And hopefully at the end of this conversation, we can give folks on the brand side, maybe some, tips or tricks as to like how to best facilitate a partnership with a nonprofit. But before we go there, could you give us a little bit of background on Friends of the Colorado Avalanche Information Center and a little bit about your background?
Of course, yeah. Friends of the Colorado Avalanche Information Center is a 501c3 that's partnered with the Colorado Avalanche Information Center, which is a department of the state of Colorado. As a nonprofit arm, kind of this public-private partnership idea, we can help them accomplish things that the state government offices aren't great at doing. So we can, go out and directly engage with partners and bring in sponsorships and partnership revenue. We can run different educational programming. We can, throw big events and do different fundraisings and have membership programs, and do things that kind of the nonprofit development teams and the non-public sector is a little better at. So that's who we are. We raise money through events, membership, individual donations, business partnerships, grants, different, kind of state, local, federal grants. And we turn around and we directly fund the forecast. So we provide direct financial support to provide avalanche forecasting. Colorado, unfortunately, tends to lead the nation in avalanche fatalities every year. We've got a lot of mountainous terrain in the state. So it's a big need in this state. And we also run a Trailhead outreach program, which I have 2 full-time employees during the winter who spend their Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday visiting busy backcountry trailheads across the state and just talking to people out in the field, and getting in front of the users, the snowmobilers, hikers, skiers, split boarders, all different types of experience levels, all throughout the winter.
Wow. What, you don't need to share specific numbers, but in terms of like a total breakdown of your funding, how much of it comes from brand partners and how much of it comes from fundraising efforts or grants or things like that? Is it a substantial amount or,
it's substantially, we publish, we're a big enough organization that we publish annual report every year. You can find it on our website. We have worked really hard to diversify our funding sources, especially we were talking about COVID a little earlier. I think that threw a lot of nonprofits for a loop, and the volatility of the partnership space and the individual donation space and event going, if you have to cancel events, it made us really focus on diversifying that. So I would say it definitely is a large component of our fundraising. And it also has a kind of a separate benefit in that it provides valuable amplification of our efforts when done correctly. And we can get into that a little bit more.
So when you think about cause marketing, I guess, do you think about it differently than maybe someone on the brand side would think about it? Like, do you have 2 different definitions of how you would define this term?
Well, I think you almost have to take a step back, right? And realize that a lot of this financial support of nonprofits or causes in general doesn't always come from the marketing department. That decision a lot of times is made at the executive level. It can be made by, ESG arms of the company if your company's big enough. It can be made by, a lot. It can come in a lot of different forms. And so as a nonprofit, I think it's important to realize that and kind of identify who you're working for, who you're working with, goals, and help identify, what exactly they're trying to achieve through that partnership and what we're trying to achieve as a nonprofit. Either, Friends of CIC or as a trail organization, for example, what your goals are. And the long-term ideal situation is a partnership that is mutually beneficial and provides, stability in funding. Isn't these like wild swings in funding versus not funding versus support, and that you're both working together and everybody understands the goals and you have a true partnership. We always appreciate a check that comes in the mail and supports the effort, but it can be a little scary, not knowing if they're seeing value in that partnership or if, they're, if that organization is supporting of your work or, if you don't get any feedback at all and you don't know if that support's going to come next year, that's a little unnerving to nonprofits. So, it's really in everybody's best interest to be aligned on these goals and have those conversations so they can both work toward it.
You find this may be a simple question, but you find like that's kind of where the recipe for success lies, is like aligning from the very beginning on those goals?
Yeah, absolutely. And that, I think that's both between a organization who's supporting a nonprofit partner or a cause, but also I think internally, I've seen instances where at a company, and we work with companies of all different sizes, right? We've got local shops donating, a few $100 here and there to the Trails organization or sponsoring a sign or something like that, to people who are providing, several thousand, tens of thousands of dollars per year. It's both important to have those, partnerships and an open line of communication, but I think it's also something that doesn't get talked about a lot is internally to the company or the brand that you're working for, making sure that they're aligned internally, because there are brands where about some of the causes that are being supported by a sustainability or a ESG arm of a company, or an executive. They might not be in close alignment. So if you're on the brand side and you're seeing maybe a different arm of your company or a different silo making these commitments and supporting these different causes, you better be aligned internally on the brand side before you start reaching out to nonprofits to try to achieve these goals.
Yeah. So tell me what an ideal partnership looks like where it's firing on all cylinders and there's great value being provided for you and the brand. And then I guess my second question would be then let's talk about maybe partnerships that haven't worked as well or don't work as well. And let's kind of examine what are the missing pieces. Assuming, I guess maybe the first step is assuming that everything is aligned, the brand is aligned in terms of their different departments and what they're trying to, they know what they're trying to get out of this partnership and what they're hoping to provide. But what works really well? What's a great case study?
There's a lot out there, and there's a lot of different ways to achieve that, right? There's brands that really will find a nonprofit and just cut them a check and then rely on them to kind of send back impact reports or achievements and things like that, and then they can integrate them. There's also brands who really don't want to maybe take that nonprofit's work, and they're really focusing more just on a feel good, hey, we're gonna do good work, we're a company for good in a more general sense, right? I think some of the partnerships that I've seen, and I'm on a smaller nonprofit side, right? There's obviously gigantic nonprofits. You've got, Red Cross, Rubicon Project, things like this that are on, the World Series during baseball commercials. We're talking much smaller investments and achievements here. So I would say one of them that's gone really well to draw from the Friends of CAIC over the past couple of years has been a partner in Ortavox. They are they're a established outdoor brand. They're not the biggest in their categories by any means. They provide really quality avalanche safety equipment, so they're in vertical to what we're doing. So it's a lot of those partners, it's a no-brainer to get involved with us. But Ortavox has really stepped up beyond just giving us some money or some product for an event, where they were ground level, hands-on with our Trailhead outreach program. They got involved right away with donations of ski straps for us to initiate conversations at trailheads. They printed, thousands of these little avalanche safety information booklets, which eliminated costs on our end to run this program. And they checked in throughout the year. Their local rep showed up to Trailhead Trailhead outreach days, got to know our coordinators and participated in handing out things, and did transceiver demonstrations, things like that. So that's been, they're now 3 years ongoing, and they're committed to moving forward, supporting that program because, they see value in it. We're talking to thousands and thousands of backcountry recreationists a year, and they're there right alongside of us, providing important program support, but also creating value for them. They're being seen as a brand that supports education, is there to show people and help them learn. And so it's been a great partnership so far. So I think that would be a good example of one.
Do you feel like the partnerships maybe don't go as well? Is there in that example, it sounds like there's a perfect alignment between your audience, if you will, and their audience. In the partnerships that don't go as well, is there maybe more of a degree of variation between audience alignment? Is that a factor in maybe why some brands have a harder time justifying, these types of partnerships?
Yeah, it's, we do work hard to find non-in-vertical partners for us, as I think both that, kind of provides a little bit of a safety net to intra-industry, ups and downs on the economic front. But I think in general, if I'm, moving back to a brand manager or an executive at a brand, or even, an owner of a ski shop, if you investing in supporting a cause that your customers don't care about, then maybe that's, taking a step back and looking at alignment. Not saying that, the cause you're supporting isn't important or isn't, something that's deserving of your energy and your financial support. But, if your customers aren't aligned, I think you have to say, like, really what is in this, what are we trying to accomplish here as a for-profit business, supporting these things, this kind of idea is business for good. So
as I was getting ready for this, I was doing some research on like cause marketing and just seeing if there's any data or stats that were out there about this idea. So you brought up an interesting point, like making sure that the brand's audience cares about the thing that they're investing in as a brand, and in this case, you guys. So I want to read some of this to you, and I'm just curious to hear your thoughts. This is from an article from Ad Age, and this is talking about how I was kind of surprised, and maybe this is I guess this is general data. It's not looking specifically at the outdoor industry, so there's probably something to be considered there. But there were some studies that were done recently that were finding that consumers care less about the causes that brands are standing behind. So one of them that I found interesting was this research from Civic Science last year found people the ages 18 to 24 put less emphasis on a brand's social conscience in their purchase decisions than the same age group did in 2017. The purchase decision dropped from 43% to 30% in terms of this age group's willingness to support brands or in their purchasing decision habits. I guess that feels kind of contrary to what I might assume. Does that surprise you?
Maybe that's like the TikTok direct sales generation. I think that's probably true to some extent, like you mentioned, at a kind of a macroeconomic thing. I'm not sure if Honda runs a commercial and says they're supporting, I don't know, sea turtle rescue. I think the one really cool thing about the younger generation, and even I wouldn't even put it younger generation, Gen X, you probably started it. They see right through any non-authentic support. And so the outdoor, kind of backcountry specific audience, like you said, I think is a little bit more into they're really like experts in what they like doing. And they see through that authenticity gap right away. So I think that's something that I would be careful of. If they know greenwashing when they see it. And so it would be hard in a study like that to differentiate, without like providing them specific examples and saying like, do you like what Tom's is doing with their shoe program? You'd probably get a positive response. Right. If you're asking in general, do you care if they help people? I don't know.
Yeah. What's your experience navigating the greenwashing topic? I would assume you're in a position where maybe that comes up or you start to sense it. What's your experience there, and how do you navigate that?
It's a hard one. I'm going to use the example. I worked in Vail Resorts for 8 years, doing both on the marketing side and then in the sustainability group. And while I was there, we went from almost not mentioning climate change, carbon footprints, things like that, and really drove in those 4 years that I was in that position, moving from not mentioning that to like developing and publicly stating some very aggressive carbon reduction goals and waste reduction goals. What I would say is it's kind of a hard line to walk, right? So even your internal employees really care about some things that as a manager you might consider greenwashing, right? Like I could spend millions of dollars and hundreds of hours reducing our electricity use or our associated carbon footprint, right? And then I still would have an occasional really angry employee who found some paper in a trash can and decided that we weren't recycling and we were the worst company on earth. But if you're a company and all you talk about is putting paper in the recycling can, I would argue that that's a little bit of greenwashing, because there's obviously very well-known issues within the recycling industry, and how the plastic industry used recycling as kind of a red herring for making actual change and increasing consumption. So it's a really funny line, and I think the only way to really address that is to take the partnership kind of one step further and look at your impacts. What are you trying to achieve? Are your motivations true? And, are they are they with the best intent, right? Do they come from a good intent? Are they not just after like a short-term ad campaign with a profit boost or a product sales launch or something like that? And you just have to kind of take it by that step, and people will be able to see. I think they're getting really smart at realizing, after years of kind of greenwashing efforts, they're starting to see what pops out. And I think the other thing that you can do to take it a step further is really integrate the partners and the impacts and some of the efforts into your marketing efforts. And allow them to tell stories. So, content is still a very important piece of a lot of marketing campaigns, email communications, social ads, things like that. And I see a lot of really hastily put together, paid social advertisements that, instead of just a random image of somebody using the product, you could integrate into, a certain amount of those impressions. You could integrate some partner impacts, or integrate some content from, areas of expertise that are associated with these nonprofits. We've got some pretty amazing athletes, backcountry users, experienced people working in the avalanche industry. And you could integrate content. You could use those positions of authority. If they talk at Trailheads, this positions of trust, to really build kind of true value in your brand. And, I don't think anybody that walks up to a Trailhead program employee at a Trailhead who's talking about new ways to access the avalanche forecast via an update on the mobile app, also, talking about how to use a transceiver, is going to get accused of being inauthentic, right? They're there to help, and they're there making a true impact. And I think that's, making sure that you're putting in an extra level of work to achieve these impacts and measure them will, prevent being accused of greenwashing or social impact washing, whatever you want to call that.
Is that something that you guys, is that something you deal with on a daily basis, or is it a pretty rare circumstance where something comes up and it feels a little off?
Luckily it's really rare in my position and at our board. We're again not playing in these like multi-million dollar spaces. So haven't seen it too much. When I manage the Ville, the social media accounts, and along with my team, we definitely had to deal with a lot of feedback and a lot of we hadn't built the trust with the audience to the point where we then came out with these kind of updated, really massive goals, and people's first reaction, they're like, wait a minute, you haven't talked about this stuff in 10 years while everyone's talking about it. Why should I trust you? What are your motivations here? So I think, making sure that you do the legwork, again, it goes back to alignment. It goes back to making sure that your consumers care about it. And it just takes work. There's no such thing as just, integrating this stuff into a marketing campaign or media without doing the legwork to make sure that you're communicating it correctly. You're not coming off in a condescending or greenwashy type way.
Yeah, this is a topic that I'd love to have like a whole series on this show about this idea of like greenwashing and marketing. And so if anyone who's listening is interested in being bold enough to step up to that plate and have a conversation about it, I think it could be really fascinating. I don't know that we have time to really dig into the weeds to it. But it is interesting to like kind of hear on the peripheral like what your experience is there. You mentioned content. You mentioned that something that brands can really take advantage of is kind of this cross-pollination effect between their audience and your audience, and the overlap that happens in between. And this is something that from our seat as like a production company and the stories that we tell, telling the story, making the content is only, half the battle. Like the other half is actually getting it out into the world so people can see it. And I could talk for days about like this problem that I feel like a lot of folks face, like getting your stuff out into the world and amplifying that message. But I've always thought like there's so many ways to cross-pollinate with a brand and their community partners, their nonprofit partners, their ambassadors. And if you incorporate all of them to some degree in the project that you're doing, like it then opens up so many more channels to get your content out there. And like you're a great example of this, I feel like. Is that something that most brands take advantage of when they work with you? Or is that like a large kind of untapped resource that you could help more people with?
Yeah, I think what I've seen is that depends a lot on who you're working with within the brand. The kind of sustainability, social impact sides of larger companies don't always think like marketers. And that's why I think it's important for those teams on the brand side to work together. But the marketing teams, especially the marketing teams that are larger and well-funded, understand, they get it. They're asking us for input. I think, a really cool example this year that we saw was we came up with a program to incentivize people to submit snowpack observations, which help the CAIC forecasters come up with accurate data and it helps the community, right? There's a local split board kind of backcountry brand called Weston that jumped aboard to really help promote and provided prizes in order to incentivize people to submit those observations. And so they not just, they could have just given us the split board for the end of the year and said, like, hope that works. But they did a really cool job. They helped us print little business cards to hand out to people that had information and a QR code and reasons why they should submit a forecast. So when our people ran into the trailhead, you could hand them a card and say, while you're up there, take a picture and send it in, and you might win something, but you're definitely going to help the CAIC forecasters write accurate snowpack forecast discussions, weather discussions, things like that. They also, worked with all their athletes. They talked about, sending in observations. We saw stories come in from their athlete team that said, I was out skiing or snowboarding today and sent in an observation to the CAIC. They really kind of took it as and ran with it. And I think that was a really cool thing for them to do, because they understand that when their athletes and their people are showing that, it really kind of puts them, it shows their brand as like this brand that gets it, right? They understand that they're part of the community. They're encouraging people to keep everybody safe. And they're kind of coming off as experts. They're coming off as people who really it's like, yeah, okay, so their athletes are out there taking pictures and digging pits and submitting them. That's really cool. That shows that the people behind this brand, know the product they're making, and they know what they're putting out there, and they support the community. So that's one example of it, I think. I don't know. Some don't get it. We see just as many of the opposite, and we're, again, thankful for the support, but you start to worry, like, are they going to come back next year if they don't see that kind of positive impact? And if the customers aren't talking back and submitting like, hey, thanks for that support, I saw you over at the trailhead, or I saw your logo, or I got a card. If they're not hearing that positive impact or positive feedback, are they going to continue? You hope so.
Yeah. What do you think the value of like a trailhead interaction is between like a brand partner with I don't know, 100 or 200 or 300 people heading out on the trailhead that day? And this is something I wonder about in the age of, like digital marketing that we're in, when you can put out a message and have it reach millions of people. Like, what is I think the answer is yes, there still is value in that one-on-one communication, like at the Trailhead with the pop-up tent. But how do you see that value? Do you feel like brands is that becoming more valuable? Is it becoming less valuable in this digital world?
Well, a lot of brands still have event teams. So if they don't think person-to-person interactions are valuable, then, I don't know. I think this is what we do is, you can support that program in particular. And we, on the trail side, we have trail volunteers who do similar things. Or, you can adopt a trail in the local community. If you don't, I think there's a distinction to be made between, online impressions and in-person questions. And maybe it's like this scale of like quality of interaction, right? Like you see thousands of impressions a day, online and through other audio, whatever you're watching, you're getting bombarded with digital media impressions. And not to say those aren't important, but I think when you're building a marketing strategy, you look at reach and you look at frequency and you look at a lot of different things, and you have to say, is this important to us? Like, is this, is an event interaction or high quality, high touch interaction important? And then knowing that you have, these other campaigns to support different stages in the purchase cycle or customer life cycle or whatever, where does that come in and if it's important? And I think that's something you have to know on the brand side, and you have to figure out what's going on with your goals. And then you can kind of reach out to organizations or cause marketing and see if that fits into your brand. And what we're seeing with a lot of partners is it does, and it provides a lot of value to them.
If you had to, our audience is primarily, folks in the marketing world. If you had to kind of jump up on a bit of a soapbox and just share like anything that you want folks to really resonate with or really understand about, like, hey, this is what it takes to like really partner with a nonprofit like us to really, move the needle, to like make things work for you and for us. What would you want to share?
I think in those partnership discussions, be forthright about your goals and let the organization and causes understand what you're trying to do. And, we're pretty good at coming up with ways to have a mutually beneficial relationship. So if you've got certain things that at the end of the year, or the end of your, that project or whatever are going to be important to you to see the value come out of it, be upfront about that. And, sometimes the organization or the cause can say, like, that's maybe not all that reasonable for what we're going to be able to provide, and come up with alternatives. Or they could, come up with really cool ideas like the program I mentioned earlier, the observation platform. That just came out of conversations, and just open conversations. So I would say be forthcoming, transparent about what you're trying to achieve and what your goals are, so that you can build multi-year partnerships.
Well, maybe to take it one step further, it sounds like align on your goals, like have a good collaboration, because who knows what's going to come out of that, and then really understand like who your audience is, and then also understand the audience of the nonprofit that you're partnering with.
Yeah, no, that's an important one too.
Where, if you had to take a guess as to where cause marketing is heading in the future, like, are you optimistic? Will it continue? Will it double down? Do you feel like, some brands are letting off the gas? Like, what's your read on the forecast?
On the marketing side, I think, as platforms evolve, and as kind of the brand space and the outdoor industry grows, hopefully continues to grow and doesn't have any like large cliffs, I think people are continuing to look for unique and high impact ways to talk to consumers, beyond just dumping a ton of money into Facebook ads, or creating another YouTube video without having some sort of story and integration into a campaign behind it. So I hope it continues to grow. I think it's really one of the more defining characteristics of the kind of backcountry outdoor industry is the almost unanimous devotion to some cause, right? Like it's almost like really odd if you go to some new company you've heard about's website and go to the about section and don't see that they're somehow supporting some cause, some impact, they have some goal. I hope, as large companies are, I think, ahead of the curve on this a little bit. They're starting to think more in terms of impacts and not just in terms of we give some money away and then things happen, and try to measure it a little bit more. I think we're going to start to see larger brands be a little more cognizant and a little more demanding of impact and results, and then, holding organizations to a little bit of a higher standard. I'm always careful to talk about and include the small business owners because they're super, super important. Like the small, as a local trail organization, we have very, very broad and widespread community support from the local business community. And that, that's allowed us to build, hundreds of thousands of dollars in bike park and trail infrastructure, and things like that. And I hope they continue to see value in investing in their communities, on a kind of like a micro scale, maybe a town-wide scale. So I hope both continue to grow. I'd love to see these like large corporate greenwashing campaigns stop. As I think the problem is if people start to think everybody's just greenwashing, then they don't trust anybody. And then they start to be a little skeptical about the true motivations of any. I think like Patagonia sees this in part. Right? They do incredible work, but they've, had this messaging out, and now all these other companies are coming out and starting to incorporate cause marketing, but they have not gone anywhere near the depth that Patagonia and, the work that they've done, and really integrate it into their company fabric. But I think there's a subset of people who are probably like, yeah, like North Face does this, Patagonia does this, all the apparel makers do this, like what's the difference? So I think I would love to see, maybe some sort of higher standard or, organizational check or some sort of impact statement. I would love if people just read annual reports. That'd be a great start.
This is something that I recorded an episode with Nicholas Bornling a couple weeks ago. It'll be out by the time this episode's out, and I think it was him. He mentioned, maybe I'm getting this mixed up, but he mentioned someone mentioned that I was talking to recently that the outdoor industry, like many brands and companies, try to stand out by fitting in, and this idea that we're all really doing the same thing. We're all, making some really cool product that's really durable and is an excellent design. And then we're all out there, hopefully supporting some good cause, whether it's avalanche safety or, sustainability. And I wish I could remember who told me this. It might have been Nicholas, but he was saying like, we're all doing the same thing. And at one point, that made us unique, that made us different because it wasn't as popular. But amongst the outdoor industry, like that's actually not that unique. Everyone's doing it. And his statement was, everyone's trying to stand out by fitting in. And maybe it's unique for the greater economy, the outdoor industry as a whole. But amongst our bubble, it's actually not that unique. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this idea.
We should celebrate that, first of all, because that's really cool. I can go down the street to a hardware store, and ask who they support in the community, and they'll look at me like I'm, from Mars. You walk into a bike shop, and they'll probably point to the wall and show you a jersey or a picture of their team out helping dig trail. So I don't think we should fall into kind of some nihilism trap around.
Sure, it's probably not a bad thing.
No, that's an incredible, and I think that's like why people really want to work in the kind of outdoors, backcountry space, is because it's almost like a a step. You got to have that. It's like a check mark to entry. And people are, they are demanding, and they want to know who you support. And I think that's, the where you can really take that next step is, like we've talked about, is like having these like truly meaningful, valuable partnerships, and going the next step into integrating this into your storytelling and integrating it into some campaigns. That's where you can really, you're not going to stand out by just saying we support social causes. That's true. But you can break through the clutter to the right person at the right time. And if your consumers, if your brand really care about something, they'll notice it. And that's, we have to be careful to like not say like, well, since everyone's doing it, then it's not worth anything. Like I don't really agree with that. I get that. Yes, just like maybe cutting a check isn't going to get you to stand out from the crowd. It's important. The organizations appreciate it and depend on it. But if your goal is to really break through and stand out, you need to go the extra step and do the work behind it to develop those relationships.
Yeah. It's not a bad thing. It's the net positive output is great, but it maybe used to be what people would rely on to stand out, and now that everyone's doing it, it's kind of table stakes, as you said.
Yeah, your product should help you stand out.
Hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
Well, yeah. If you had to kind of wrap it up for us, distill some of the lessons that you've learned working with brand partners, or maybe any lessons too for kind of budding nonprofits who are looking to form partnerships, what would you send people home with?
Yeah, that's I think we go back to what we talked about earlier, is just really open communication and being truthful right off the bat about your goals. Having a call or having a chat over coffee, or just some open communications about what your goals are and what you're trying to accomplish. And if you're in the nonprofit space, or if you're kind of on the impact side, I would say do some legwork into who you're reaching out to, and you're not just asking for a check. Like, you make sure that you can, to the level where it makes sense for your organization, make sure that you can be a valuable partner to that entity. And, a lot of partnerships start very, very small and can grow over the years into really big, impactful projects. And it doesn't always start, with this huge support level right off the bat. I would, we really focus on making space at our organizations, both the organizations that I'm involved with, making space for everybody, from a very, small local community shop or a brand that just wants to dip their toes in the space, and, treat them with respect, have open communication, and talk about the goals. And, I think just coming at it with that level of kind of open communication and building a trustful partnership right off the bat goes so far, and it opens the door towards a lot of really cool opportunities in the future.
Yeah, amazing. Brian, if folks want to connect with you, if they want to ask you more questions, if they want to learn more about any of the programs you're affiliated with, where can people find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn's a great one. I imagine you'll tag me on there, hopefully, with the podcast. Friendsofcasa.org has all the contact info you need for that side of things. vvmta.org has the trail side of things. You can get in contact with me through both those websites. Always happy to chat with people. We could leave on this, because this is, I'm sure as you do too, that, I get asked all the time for recommendations on how'd you get your job? How'd you break into the space? Things like that. And I remember when I graduated college back in 2005, all I wanted to do was work in the ski industry. It's all I wanted to do. And I could not get a soul to write me back. I got an HR department offering, to come up and apply as a lift operator or something. And I was a marketing graduate, and all I wanted to do was just hear from somebody. And so I have just taken that personally. Like, when people reach out to me, and I think I would recommend everybody do, just like take the time to respond. thoughtfully, or even if you have to have a canned response somewhere for when people write you, just respond, because that could mean the world to a kid coming up, or a high school, project or something like that. It could really change their life. Whereas, I just ran into a bunch of closed doors back when I was looking back in the day, and somehow squeaked in. It was a long path. So
sometimes the best things take time, and we run into a few doors along the way. But Brian, thanks for taking the time to chat. Thanks for sharing your perspective. And I hope you have a great rest of your day and get a few more laps in while the snow is here.
It is dumping outside as we're recording this. It's
awesome.
May 7th, and we've got 4 inches on the patio. So yeah, I might go ski later.
All right. See ya.
See ya.